On a sweltering and humid day in July last year, chaos descended on a tiny village in eastern Ukraine. Hundreds of bodies and tons of burning wreckage began raining down over miles of wheat and ripening sunflower fields. At this moment, no one knew why. It was painfully clear, though, that disaster had struck Malaysia Airlines Flight Mh17, which had fallen 6 miles to Earth.
A Malaysian Airlines flight.
Aircraft of Malaysian Airlines.
Malaysia Airlines dengan nomor
The scenery
penerbangan.
is truly shocking.
298 people have been confirmed dead.
As news spread across the globe, it quickly became clear that the 298 passengers and crew hadn't been killed in an accident. They'd been murdered. Mh17 had been flying normally. There was no mechanical failure and no distress call. But 33,000 feet beneath them was a war zone. And something had blown them out of the sky. For the relatives, the questions were what had happened and why, and then who had been responsible. 10 Britons died in a disaster unlike any other. Rebel soldiers prevented access to the site for long periods. Air crash experts couldn't get in to get answers. Bodies lay rotting for days in hot summer sunshine.
One of the worst air disasters the world has ever seen.
As the investigation stagnated, interest in Mh17 waned and all but disappeared from the screens. Families were left in a void, no information and no action. 6 months on, they're still waiting for answers. At 23, Jordan Withers from Blackpool had just graduated in law from Chester University when Mh17 went down. On board was his uncle. Glenn Thomas was a former local journalist who'd been working as a spokesman for the World Health Organization and was on his way to Australia for a conference.
There's nothing in the world I'd trade to have, maybe one more minute with Glenn. I think about him every day, actually. I might be eating my dinner, I'll stop for 2 minutes and I'll just be thinking about him. I can't really put into words how much I miss him, and he shouldn't have lost his life in the way he did, and shouldn't have happened so early. So yeah, that's it's difficult.
Jordan is leaving Blackpool, heading for Ukraine, where many of the answers still lie. He'll meet people who are at the crash site, other relatives from Europe, and experts who will cast new understanding on what happened to all those on board. This is the plane that crashed, filmed a few months earlier at Frankfurt. A Boeing 777 with the registration Mike Romeo Delta. On the 17th of July, when Mh17 was destroyed, it had been in service for exactly 17 years to the day. Its flight plan would take it from Schiphol Airport in Amsterdam to Kuala Lumpur, some 6,000 miles away, with a flying time of about 13 hours. On board, everything had been normal. It was the start of the summer school break, and many of the passengers were Dutch families, heading for paradise beaches lining the South China Sea.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to take you through a few
Malaysian 17, when the EasyJet behind is clear, push pull approved.
Now, Jordan is to follow part of the same route. He'll fly from Amsterdam to Kiev, the capital of Ukraine.
It's made me slightly nervous about flying because, when you set off in a plane, you expect to get there, which is what my uncle expected.
I'd like to welcome you on board of this flight to Kiev.
And I feel a little bit nervous about flying into Ukraine, obviously with the civil unrest earlier on in 2014 and what happened with Mh17.
Tomorrow, Jordan will learn how the loss of his uncle's flight is inextricably linked with Ukraine's recent bloody history. Just 5 months before Mh17 was shot down, Kiev was in anarchy. At stake was whether Ukraine should move closer to the European Union or look east towards Russia. When closer trade ties with the EU were rejected by the president, thousands of people took to the streets. The demonstrations later led to a change in government. The focus was Independence Square, which became a battlefield with over 100 dead and thousands injured. Jordan was at Independence Square to visit a memorial to those killed in the uprising.
Without what happened here, the plane might have never been down, the other side of Ukraine. It's amongst all the other pictures of conflict and fighting, and then you've got this at the end where this was put here for a reason, I guess. I mean, it's quite powerful looking at it. A part of the wreckage. I'm kind of lost for words of it, really. This was the cause, and this is the effect, I guess. This is what the outcome of all this here was, and we're still waiting for the resolution, and hopefully we can find that here somewhere.
Within a month of the uprising, Russia had annexed Crimea from Ukraine. In the east, rebels, allegedly supported by Moscow, declared independence in the regions around Donetsk and Luhansk. This was the area Mh17 would be flying directly over just 3 months later. It was now in the most dangerous sky in the world. 68 people had died here in shoot-downs in the last 6 weeks alone. Rebel rocket launchers brought down low-flying Ukrainian military aircraft. 3 days before Mh17, that changed dramatically. This plane had been at 21,000 feet, according to the Ukrainians, who said it had been hit by a surface-to-air missile. The Russian news agency TASS reported at the end of June that the rebels had captured a Buk missile system from the Ukrainians, a story denied by Kiev. The Buk is a mobile surface-to-air missile, or SAM weapon, which was originally developed in the Soviet Union. It can fire a missile up to a height of about 15 miles, way above the zone in which commercial airliners fly. Its warhead weighs about 70 kilograms. That's about the same as the American-made Patriot missile. In this remarkable United States Air Force film, a test firing at an unmanned drone jet shows how destructive the SAM can be. Mh17 has now flown about 1,200 miles across Europe, Air traffic controllers are monitoring its progress at Dnipro radar in Ukraine.
Malaysian 17, Dnipro radar. Good day, radar contact.
Malaysian 17.
Duty free still will be carried out after our dinner service.
Malaysian 17, how do you read me? Malaysian 17, Dnipro radar. Malaysian 17, Dnipro radar.
The flight manifest showed that a total of 298 people died in the shootdown. The majority were Dutch, with 43 Malaysians, 27 Australians and 10 UK nationals. Along with Jordan's uncle, Glenn Thomas, there was Liam Sweeney, a 28-year-old Newcastle United fan, who was travelling with 63-year-old John Alder on their way to follow their team's pre-season tour in New Zealand. Ben Pocock was a 20-year-old from Bristol, who was in his second year at Loughborough University studying international business. Richard Main was also 20. He was from Leicester, studying maths and finance at Leeds University. The other 5 UK victims, Cameron DL, Stephen Anderson, Robert Ailey, John Allen and Andrew Hall, had all been living abroad. In the cargo hold, 2 dogs and 9 birds also perished.
Thank you. So what is this called?
Yum yum.
Yam yam?
Yum yum.
It's Jordan's first visit to Ukraine.
Good.
In his quest to find answers, he's arranged to meet a man who was one of the first on the scene of the disaster. Michael Bocherkiw is a Canadian-Ukrainian who works for the Organisation for Security and Cooperation in Europe, the OSCE. It's an unarmed monitoring body supported by states in Western and Eastern Europe, Russia and America.
It's fantastic to be able to finally meet you and speak to someone who's been to the crash site and was first on the scene.
It's actually a very beautiful area. It's farmland, sunflower fields, bucolic like most of Ukraine is. And the first thing I saw was that kind of iconic tail fin that broke off and was just sitting by itself in a field, I believe it was a wheat field.
How dangerous do you think that the site actually was, and could there have been a quicker response from the international community?
Well, it is an active conflict zone, and we were reminded by that by shelling in the distance. And then there were some rebel leaders, if you want to call them that, and we didn't receive that warm of a reception, I must admit. They didn't seem happy to see us. They blocked part of the road. We felt somewhat anxious around them. It was a scene where you never knew what might happen next. You know, that first days, they're horrific scenes we saw, some of which we'll never talk about to anybody. And I've seen disasters before, for example, floods in the Philippines, but nothing like this.
Right, so today we met Michael from the OSCE. He said to me after the interview, I was getting quite emotional at one point, and I was like, well, this guy who really put his heart and soul into sorting that crash site out for the benefit of the families, I thought that was, you know, such a touching point to make to me after the interview, that he was, you know, that's how passionate he felt about it. And it's a nice feeling knowing that there is people out there that are fighting for the families.
In the days after the crash, Russia and the West exchanged tit-for-tat allegations. Ukraine and the West blamed rebels for launching a Russian-supplied missile. Russia denied it, and alleged that a Ukrainian fighter jet had shot down Mh17. Dutch experts headed the investigation and eventually collected most of the wreckage. Their only reports so far claimed the jet had been pierced by objects travelling at high speed. The West imposed economic sanctions on Russia, which saw the ruble tumble in value. Jordan's back in the Netherlands, on his way to Rotterdam, to meet a family who lost 2 loved ones in the disaster. 23-year-old Bryce Friedrichs and his 20-year-old girlfriend Daisy Uhlers were on their way to a holiday in Bali when they died. They lived together in Rotterdam with Bryce's parents, Celine and Rob. Their bedroom has been left exactly as it was on the day they boarded Mh17.
Sometimes I have to cry, sometimes it's like they can come back anytime.
Yeah.
Sometimes I still think they can walk in the door.
Yeah.
Anytime.
When I look around, it's like stuff like the posters on the walls, the games I used to play and on, you know, games consoles, and the same sort of mess that.
Yeah. I love the mess.
Boys my age always
I love the mess now.
Yeah, because it's his mess.
The family's grief has been intensified because they've had no bodies to bury. They've been left in an emotional limbo.
From Bryce we had identification of his right foot, and then after a few weeks they found 2 pieces of bone. Everything was severely burned, and from Daisy on the 22nd of October, also a piece of bone from 18 centimeters.
Small pieces of bone.
That's all.
That's all we have.
Yeah. At this point we feel lucky that we have something, even though it's only small pieces.
Yeah, I agree totally with you.
Because there's still 6 people who have nothing at all. Well, in the beginning I didn't want to know anything. I didn't want to see anything on television. I didn't want to hear anything. But now, after almost 5 months, I want to know everything. I don't want to see everything, but I want to know everything. I want to know why they died. See each other soon, yeah?
Yeah, see you soon. It's nice to meet you.
The lack of access at the site delayed the repatriation of the victims. It was a month before the first funeral could be held in Britain. It would be 3 months before Jordan could hold a service for his uncle Glenn. The town of Hilversum near Amsterdam lost 15 people in 3 families who'd been on board Mh17. It became the centre of Dutch mourning.
Alle krachten verzamelen. Geliefde, al die obstakels, die gaan we eventjes opruimen. We gaan proberen om de weg, ons levenspad glad te maken. We lost 195 people, so all over our country people died. There were about 70 or 80 young people and children.
And how do you feel about that some people out there haven't got any closure at all? I mean,
it's to be crazy.
I know.
It's to be crazy. For those who has nothing been found, it's terrible. It's terrible. It's war in the hearts. Terrible.
St James's Park, home to Newcastle United, and Jordan is here to maintain a friendship forged in terrible circumstances. Barry Sweeney is a father who first met Jordan in Downing Street as the government briefed relatives just days after the crash. He lost his son Liam, the first British victim to be identified.
It's unbelievable, it's a nightmare. I still believe I'm having a nightmare now, and one day I'll wake up and everything will be back to normal. lives have changed forever. My life, your life, everybody else. I remember bringing Liam to Rude Hullett's last game against Sunderland. It was torrential rain here. I was sitting over on the stand there and we got beat 2-1, but I think he was hooked up to that.
Do you think we'll get justice one day?
Very, very difficult, because people keep asking who did it. We'll possibly know who did it, but you can't see it until you can prove something. It would be nice for somebody to hold their hands up and say, yes, it was us and it was an accident. It would be nice to think it wasn't an act of war at the time, but when they died, was it instantaneous? Because at the end of the day, that's, you know, that would be something that I would hate to think that anybody suffered on the flight. And if they didn't suffer, well, if you class it as a bonus, it's a bonus.
Yeah.
So what did shoot down Mh17? Machine gun fire from a Ukrainian jet fighter, as Russia claims, or a missile fired by the rebels? Ukraine released what it said were telephone intercepts of rebels discussing the shoot-down of a military plane, which turned out to be Mh17. There's never been independent verification. Jordan's come to Cranfield University, where they teach air crash investigators and are experts on ballistic missiles.
So we've got a couple of images from the crash site, you know, that people took. I think this is an image still of, I guess, a part of the plane. I'm not sure what part.
It looks to be part of the cockpit side. This is the front and then the side windows of the cockpit. That might be interpreted by somebody who's just looking at this the first time to say, oh, that's a line of machine gun holes. But that's actually quite unlikely, because they're very closely spaced and they're not quite round enough to be bullet holes. What they more likely are a line of fragments from a warhead, and those would start to tell us something about the makeup of the warhead. The bullet is precise, so it produces a precise circular hole.
I can't believe the difference between how that bullet hole looks, you know, in comparison to that. That one there's the bullet hole, is that correct? That one, and that's really, really clean. I mean, I can't believe, you know, comparing it to the stuff we've just talked about. I think that kind of debunks the rumour that, you know, it was a machine gun fire, because there's nothing that clean on the plane that we saw. It definitely wasn't machine gun fire, and it was definitely some sort of projectile, missile or warhead.
On the morning Mh17 left Amsterdam, Ukrainian airspace was closed below 32,000 feet in warnings issued to airlines known as Notice to Airmen. No reason was given, but it was imposed on the same day the military plane had been shot down by a missile. Just 10 hours before Mh17 departed, the Russians also put identical flight restrictions on their airspace across the border. Their warning was specific: combat actions and firing from Ukraine. Mh17 would be flying just 1,000 feet above the restriction. Aviation lawyer Richard Langton has handled cases for relatives of victims of 9/11 and the Lockerbie bombing.
I think there's a very strong argument that whatever air traffic control permitted flights at 33,000 feet must have known there was a risk from the ground, because why apply any ceiling unless they know there's a risk? And then not to realise that the risk is still there at 33,000 feet seems to me to be clearly negligent. You know, it's a foreseeable risk that could have been avoided. I mean, that is their job, to make flying safe.
For Jordan, it's been a difficult journey, touching wounds that have barely had time to heal. But it's been worth the pain.
There are still people caring about this, and making them connections with the other families for me has been absolutely tremendous, because I now know I've got people I can turn to, that I can talk to about it. I can say, look, I'm having a bad day, help me, let's talk about it. And I know that that's something that's been amazing. I just hope he was you know, gone quickly and he didn't feel any pain. That's the main thing for me. I don't think I'll get the whole truth. I don't think we'll get justice. You could put £100 million right in front of me and someone says, will you be quiet about this whole thing and be happy? I'll go, no, you can take your money. And unless I could buy Glenn back with that, then no. You know, I'm never going to be happy. There's always going to be a part of me missing.